Good evening. This is your first video for the meteorology unit. Meteorology is not a word that we use a lot. We usually just say weather, but the science that determines weather forecasting and aspects of weather is just actually called meteorology. It's a branch of physics. It's a type of physics. So the real definition of meteorology, anytime a word ends in logy, it usually means the study of something. In this case, it's the study of atmospheric phenomenon. A phenomenon, of course, is something that occurs that can be explained. And of course, meteorology can be explained, just like any science can be explained for the most part. So look at the word meteor in meteorology. Sometimes we think of meteor as a piece of rock or dust burning up in the atmosphere like a shooting star. But meteor really just means high in the air. When you translate that to English, it means high in the air. So we're not talking about meteors made out of rock or dust. We're talking about hydrometeors. And of course, hydro means water. Hydrometeors, of course, are any kind of water that falls through the atmosphere. So raindrops, snowflakes, fog, sleet, hail, that kind of stuff. To give you an example, lithometeors, litho means rock. These are, in this case, it really means the dust or very small dirt particles that serve as a place for water molecules to cling to in order to make a raindrop. So what I guess I'm telling you is at the heart of every raindrop, there is a small segment or a piece of dirt in which the water molecules clung to form a raindrop. This can also be a particle of dust or smoke or haze. It doesn't have to be dirt. Any small thing which the water can cling to. Weather versus climate. In class today, we talked about weather being the current state of the atmosphere, what the readings are right now. And climate is a much longer variation at looking at weather. And most textbooks agree that 30 plus years would be considered climate. So we can say, we can make statements like, Florida has a warm climate. Now that's not been determined because Florida was warm last summer. It's because Florida has been warm for decades, centuries even. And we have records to show that. So we can safely say that there is a warm climate in Florida because it's been looked at for over 30 years. So air masses are one of the driving things that cause weather to happen. Just yesterday when it started off warm and ended up cold last night and this morning, gave us an indication that an air mass, a cold air mass, moved into our area over eastern Kentucky. So basically it's a large body of air that has the characteristics of the area from which it forms. So if it forms over Canada in the wintertime, it's going to be cold and most likely dry. The place where it forms is called the source region. So here are 5 types of air masses that we can find all around the globe. And it's based upon 2 words, and each word has 2 possibilities. So you can have a continental tropical air mass. Continental means it formed over land. Tropical means it formed in a warm area. So the opposite of continental is maritime. That means on the ocean. So if an air mass formed over an ocean, it's going to be humid. If it's tropical, again, it's going to be warm. The third word, though, as opposed to warm, cold. You know what cold means. And then, of course, there's dry and humid. So cold or warm, dry or humid. And that's, dry, tropical usually means warm and moist, whereas continental usually means dry. Maritime usually means warm, but it doesn't, moist, but it doesn't have to be necessarily one temperature. You could have cold, humid air masses too. If it comes out of the North Atlantic or the North Pacific, the air mass is moist because it's over the water, but it's also going to be cold because it's in a northern latitude. And then Arctic usually has one letter, just A. It is the coldest air possible. It's colder than polar air masses. So in North America, which is of course the United States, Canada, and part of Mexico, here are some source regions for those particular air masses. So remember, little m means maritime, so P means polar. Maritime polar, which is a warm, moist, cold air mass, can form over the North Atlantic or North Pacific. Continental, which forms over land, CP. Continental polar, that's going to be over land and from a cold area. The interior of Canada, which means the middle of Canada, and or Alaska can produce those air masses. Maritime tropical, that's moist over water, and tropical means hot. The Caribbean Sea or the Gulf of Mexico are two ideal places for that. Continental tropical, the desert southwest of the United States and Mexico. It's going to be nice and warm. That's the tropical part, but it's continental, so it's going to be dry. And then Arctic air usually comes from Siberia, which is northern Russia, and in the Arctic basin around the Arctic Circle. And I realized I spelled Arctic wrong. Now, air masses don't keep the same characteristics. So if you had an Arctic air mass that originated over the North Pole, it's not going to stay cold as it moves south. It's going to warm up. It's going to take on the characteristics of the area that it moves into. So we call this air mass modification. Modification means to change. So if that cold, dry air mass, as an example, moves over a warm sea or warm part of the ocean, it's going to pick up lots of moisture because of evaporation, and it's also going to increase its temperature. So we'd have to change it from an Arctic air mass to a maritime tropical air mass. So air masses change as they move around the globe. So if they start off in northern Russia and come across the pole to North America, then they're going to eventually warm, and they might pick up more moisture, especially if they cross the Great Lakes. So air masses do change. They don't stay the same as far as moisture and temperature as they move across the globe. This is called air mass modification. And that brings us to the end of the first video, nice and short and sweet. Remember, there will be a quiz tomorrow in class as you enter. It'll be an open note quiz. Thanks. See you.